Before implementing the custom accordion, I want to explain a small change that I made to the project structure to take advantage of Next.js's App Router. So in Next.js we have this convention where we have this special folder named app, and we have special files named page, and inside of the app folder we can define routes for our application, but for a path to become a route it needs to quotes and right to have a file named page, a page component. Okay, so for example, app represents the root of the application, and here we have the page, this page component, and as you can see, this page component is only returning an H1 right now, and again this represents the root of the application. If I visit the root of the application, you can see the same text, okay, from this page component here. So each folder represents a path segment, and if the folder contains a page, then it becomes a route. So for example, here I have this nested structure app accordion native, right? Again, I don't need to type app because it represents the root of the application, but if I type accordion and native, then we can visit the native implementation of the accordion, right? The implementation that I made in the previous video. It's take a bit longer than expected, okay? So I think this is because this is the first compiling, okay? So this is the native implementation. Now, with this structure and with the way Next.js works, I can group related data. I can have a folder named data and put the data in here. So as you can see, the same data is being used by both native and custom implementations of the accordion, and I can keep this data together with the implementations. So you may think, well, what if I visit /data? Am I not going to expose the data, right? And the answer is no. Why? Because this is not a route. For a path inside of this folder to become a route, it needs a page, right? And doesn't have a page, it has a data.ts file. So this is how the app router works. Now let's implement the custom version of the accordion. And when we think about implementing a thing from scratch, we have to think about the behavior of the widget. So we need two modes, single and mode selection, and this is the behavior for single selection mode. All answers are initially collapsed. When user clicks a question, its answer is expanded, and when user selects a different question, the answer of the previous question is collapsed, and the current question's answer is expanded. If the answer selects, not the answer, user. If the user selects or clicks the same question, the state of the answer is toggled. For mode selection, this is the desired behavior. Again, initially we want to hide all of the answers, right? And then if the user select question, the mode, if there was a selected question when the mode was enabled, we want to keep the answer expanded and toggle the state of the answer for each selected question. So if we are in mode selection and if the user is in mode selection, he clicks a question, the answer is expanded, but if the user clicks the same question, we want to collapse the answer for that question, okay? And when we disable mode selection, we want to collapse all answers, okay? This is the behavior. Now let's implement the component. And again, the first thing we have to do is to transform this into a client component, because we want to work with React hooks and with events. Sometimes I forgot the name. So let's import use state from React and import the data as well. Right? Let me change this. I don't know why the editor is suggesting I think I made a mistake while configuring the initial setup. I was supposed to get this recommendation here when importing, right? And let me create the component export default function accordion, and again, this is the custom version, and therefore I'm not going to use the native elements, the native details and summary elements. I'm going to use 8.2 for the questions and paragraphs for the answers. Okay, so let me return this JSX. I want a div, and inside of this div I have a button, and this button will enable multi-selection, and then I want this div as a wrapper for all of the questions, and in here I want to loop over the data, right, and display a question with its answer for each item of the data array. Remember that data is an array of objects, and each object contains an ID, a question, and an answer. Now for each item we want to return some JSX, right? Let me add a div, and the first thing that I want to do is to set the key to prevent an editor complaining about the missing key. And inside of this div I want to add an h2. The h2 is for holding the question, and I want to add that fake button, right? Let me add an span here and add this plus sign as a fake button. And then I want to add a paragraph, and inside the paragraph I want to display the answer. Let me check the result, and we have to navigate to /accordion/custom, right? This is what we get. I'm going to pause the video and add the CSS. Okay, I have added the classes, the tailwind classes, the widget is already installed, but nothing works as right now. Okay, so we need to handle single selection, we need to handle mode selection, and we need to allow the user to toggle between the two different modes, right? So we can create functions here for that. Function handle mode selection, right? Handle. Let me start with the toggle. Enable multi-selection, and then another function for single selection, function handle single selection, and then another function for handling multi-selection, right? Both will need to access the ID of the question, so let's add a parameter here of type string, and And we need a piece of state for knowing whether or not mode selection have been enabled. So let's add this piece of state const and enabled multi-selection and set enabled multi-selection, right? Initially mode selection is disabled, so let's set it to false, and we can conditionally display this name here. Let's interpolate some JavaScript, and based on this piece of state we want to display the word enable or disable. So if mode selection is not enabled, then we want to enable, else we want to disable mode selection. And we can already define the onClick here and call the toggle function, and we want to check, right, again, if mode selection is not enabled, then we want to enable mode selection, else we want to disable mode selection. Let's check if this is already working, and as you can see, as I click the button, the name changes, right? So now we need a way to keep track of the selected questions, and my idea was to use a map for that. So what is a map, right? Let's review what a map is. Maps are object, right? The map object holds key value pairs, and this is the important thing. You can use any value, both objects and primitive values, for setting the key or the value. So when you create a map, you first have to instantiate a map, and then you can add pairs of key values, right? And you can use anything for both key and value. So as you can see, to set a pair, you call the set method of map instances, and then you specify the key and the value. And to get the value stored at that key, you call the get method specifying the key, right? So set, you have to specify both, and to get the value, you specify the key you are interested in. So this is my strategy. I'm going to use a map for letting the application know which of the questions, the questions that are selected and the questions that are not selected. Okay, so let me create this map. I'm going to call the map is selected map, new instance of map, and then I need to populate this based on the ID of the question. So my map will contain information about each question, each item of the data array. Based on the ID, I'm going to use the ID as the key and initially set the value to be false for each question, meaning none of the questions have been selected. So let me loop over this array. Remember that here I'm looping over the data array, and this for loop here for it is an instance method of array. Okay, for it I have a typo in here, and it accepts a callback, and this callback has access to a few things, and the first thing it has access to is the element. So element here representing one of the arrays, okay? Sorry, one of the objects. we want to loop, right? And then we want to access the isSelected map and set what's the key? item.id. What's the value? False, meaning initially. So again, we have this map, and then we are looping over the data array, and we are populating the map by setting the key, which is the ID of the question, right? Key string 1 equals to false. Key string 2 equals to false, meaning this question has not been selected. This is how we can track the selected questions using a map. This is an approach. There are different approaches. You can use an arrays, for example. Now we want to create another piece of state. This is going to be the isSelected, not map this time. Set isSelected, and then we want to set this piece of state, the initial state equals to the isSelected map. Okay, and now we can use this piece of state to hide the answers. So for now, all of the answers are expanded. We don't want the application to the widget to work like that. We want the answers to be initially collapsed, and then we can use this piece of state for conditionally rendering the answers. So let's do that and interpolate some JavaScript here, and based on the isSelected, right, if we are accessing the map and passing what? The ID of this item, right? Item dot ID, and if the value is true, we want to render this. Else, we want to hide, right? Again, initially, this is a map that for it all of the values are false, right? For all of the quiz, the value is false, and therefore when we loop through the data array and get the value at this key, this is going to be false initially, and we are not going to render this paragraph. I think I don't even need this. Yeah, I don't even need this parentheses, pair of parentheses, but that's okay. So it's working already. We are in the custom URL, right? This is the custom URL representing the custom component, the custom accordion component. I got distracted here. And as you can see now, all of the answers are collapsed, right? Now, what do we want to do when the user clicks the question? Again, the question is represented by an H2 element. The first thing we want to do is to check in which mode the widget is, right? So on click, we want to do the following. We want to check if mode selection is enabled. Then we want to call, what do we want to call? We want to call the handle single selection, right? If mode selection is not enabled, sorry for that, it's a question mark. We want to call handle single selection, else we want to call handle multi-selection, but we need to pass the ID, right? Item.id for both methods. Again, here when the user clicks the question, selects the question, we want to check if mode selection is not enabled, then we want to call handle single selection, else we want to call handle mode selection. Now let's implement this behavior here. Again, we want to update the map, right? But we cannot do it directly. We cannot change the state directly in React. So we want to create a temporary map, const t equals new map based on the current state, right? And then we can update this temporary map, and then after we update the temporary map, we can pass it to set is selected and update the state. And here, what do we want to do? Remember, we are handling single selection, right? So we want to set, we want to loop, right, this map, and for it we have here value, we have to specify the callback, right? And this callback has access to the value, to the key, and to the map. We are not going to use the value, and therefore I'm going to add this underscore here. So this is a convention. If you are not going to use the thing, but you are required to specify it, you have to you can add this an underscore to let people know that you are not going to use this parameter, right? And then here, what do we want to do? We want to check if this key is equal to the current question ID. Then we want to access the map and set the key to true, and else we want to access the map and set the key to false, right? So again, user visits the application, selects the first question. What's going to happen? We are going to call what we check, right? Mode selection not enabled, then call handle single selection, passing the ID of the question of this question. Here the handle single selection accepts the ID as question ID, right? And then we check. We are creating a temporary map based on the current state. Right now, for all of the quiz, the value is false, but we are looping through this temporary map, and for the key that is equals to the question that was just selected, we want to set it to true. And then finally we want to update set call and set and is selected, passing this map, right? Let's check if this is working. If I click, okay, as you can see, only the current question's answer is expanded. But what if I click the same what if I select the same question? You can see that nothing happens, but I can but the desired behavior is that if I click the same question over and over, I want to toggle between collapsing and expanding the answer, right? To do that, I can simply add a condition in front of this here, and I want to access the selected and get the value for this current question ID, and if it's true, meaning the question the answer is expanded, right? The question has already been selected. I want to set it to false, and else I want to loop over the array and do this stuff in here, right? Let's check the logic, and as you can see, if I select a different question, and we have the expected behavior, and then if I select the same question, we toggle between expanding and collapsing the answer, right? So this is how we can handle single selection. And to handle mode selection, we just need to, again, build a temporary map based on the current state, and then we want to toggle, right, the value for the key for the question. So we want to access this temporary map, get the value at this key, and then if this is true, we want to set this to false, right? t.set question ID to false, and else if it's false, we want to set it to true. And then after we do that, we can call set is selected to t. Now let's check. We are in single selection mode, and if we enable, right, because we created this temporary map based on the current state, the last selected question remained opened, right? And if I click other questions, I can expand their answers, and I can collapse as well. Okay, so this is how you can implement. So if by the way, right now if I enable or disable mode selection, you can see that nothing happens, but as I said, I want to collapse all of the answers when I disable mode selection. To do that, I'm going to add another line here, and the only thing that I have to do is to set is selected to the is selected map. Remember that the is selected map has its values, the values for each key set to false, and therefore when I disable mode selection, the value for each key becomes false and all of the answers are collapsed. So this is how you can implement a custom accordion